one of the very harsh realities of life is that one must always be willing to make trade-offs. And so trade-offs occur when you apply the OR operator across your requirements or your criteria. So specifically, if you were looking for a property, you may say, I would take X or Y, but I concede that I can't necessarily have both. So on London property data, one of the attributes that we have is the estate type. So leasehold means that you are not actually purchasing the property, you are only purchasing the right to rent the building from a landlord for somewhere between 80 to 999 years. It is all very feudal and very 9th century. So on that basis, let's assume that freehold is the least worst option. And so note that that gives you access to 36% of the market. So you may say, well, I would take freehold or a terraced property, but I don't require both. And so here note that that didn't actually increase the access to the market by that much. It only increased it by 2%. And the reason for that is because there's a very strong overlap between these two criteria. So given that a property is either freehold or terraced, in 69% of cases, it is both. And that represents 26% of the overall market. So now for good measure, let's say, well, we would really be willing to take anything that is not a flat. And so here note that that didn't actually increase your access to the market at all, but it did increase your likelihood of finding a place that meets both of your criteria. So this here is giving you the breakdown and showing of the properties that meet the estate type and the required property type, what specific property type and estate type are they? So this gives you the intersection of those other two fields. So now let's say you were to look at freehold or flat. Well, in this case, that doesn't restrict your search at all because 98% of properties are either of those things. And so here you can see that they're almost mutually exclusive. It's either a flat or it's a freehold. The things that meet both conditions here, there are only 1% of flats, in fact, that meet both conditions, which makes sense because you generally cannot own the building if it is shared. And so if you were applying filters as opposed to using sets here, filters would only return this 1% of your selection. So one thing to be aware of is that people are very used to the data set reducing as they apply filters, and it may appear counterintuitive that as you apply selection, your result set is actually increasing. So now let's say you wanted to look at the overlap between leasehold and flat. So that gives you 65% of properties. And of properties that are either leasehold or flat, 96% are both. And so you can start to see through really simple interaction, you can analyze relationships, overlaps, exclusions, intersections across those different criteria. And so if we add in now terraced, so if we say that we would take leasehold, a leasehold or a flat or a terraced property, then that gives you access to 91% of the market. Of that, 70% meets leasehold and flat or terraced, while 30% is leasehold and is either leasehold or one of these two conditions here. So often the default reaction is if performing this type of analysis, we need Venn diagrams or a diagram that is specifically dedicated towards representing the overlap. However, those Venn diagrams don't scale combinatorially very well. Once you have more than 3 categories, it's pretty much impossible to visualize. Whereas interaction through simple bar charts does scale reasonably well as you increase your criteria and as you increase the number of items within your selection. So the next video is going to go through and describe from scratch how to rebuild this example.